So this is tones and tails. We have a problem in this course in general, knowing just what level to give you lectures at. And I worry that for some of you, can you hear? Yes. But for some of you, these things may be too elementary. But on the other hand, we can't really give very elaborate discussions of intonation unless we're sure that the basic elementary facts are clearly understood by everybody. So today's lecture, for many of you, will cover matters that you already know, and I hope know very thoroughly. Nevertheless, I hope there is something for you to learn from it. What I'm going to do today is present to you the analysis, the anatomy of the English tone unit, word group. And the analysis I shall offer you is essentially that put forward by O'Connor and Arnold in the textbook Intonation of Colloquial English. Another of the problems in dealing with intonation is that at the moment we are in an odd situation that there is no generally available good textbook for teaching English intonation in the classroom. Longman, for reasons that are best known to them, decided to delete O'Connor and Arnold from their list and to cease to make it available. But they did this before they had made sure that any replacement was available. Meanwhile, an enterprising Japanese publisher has leapt in and reissued O'Connor and Arnold with Japanese introduction and so on. At the moment, that is the only version that is on the market. So if you know any enterprising authors who are looking for a good place to publish a textbook, this is one. A good classroom textbook on English intonation. Well, the general views about the anatomy of English intonation that we find in O'Connor and Arnold are not really controversial. We all agree that we need to break up the stretch of speech into smaller chunks, which we can call word groups following O'Connor and Arnold, or tone units as I shall. It's the same thing. And it's clear that this smaller stretch includes within it always at least one accented syllable, and quite often two or more accented syllables. We saw last time that if there's one accented syllable, then it's the nucleus. Halliday calls it the tonic, it's the same thing. If there are two or more accented syllables within the tone unit, then the nucleus, the tonic, is the last such one, and the first one can be referred to as the onset. Now, because English has many unstressed syllables, and even some stressed syllables may be unaccented, no pitch prominence, it follows that we can identify some material before the onset and some material after the nucleus. And the term that we use for the material before the onset is the pre-head, the material before the head, which we shall come to in a minute. So, unaccented syllables right at the beginning constitute the pre-head. I hope you're sitting comfortably. That's the pre-head. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Unstressed before we start. I think it's absolutely awful. That's the pre-head. I think it's absolutely awful. The first accented syllable, the first accent, marks the beginning of what we call the head. The head extends from the onset, the first accent, up to the nucleus, but not including the nucleus. The nucleus, or tonic, as we saw, is the last accent, and then the material after the last accent constitutes the tail. And the tail, again, by definition, must consist of unaccented syllables. We had the example yesterday, good morning, Mr. Jenkinson, where Mr. Jenkinson, vocative, doesn't get an accent. So, good morning, Mr. Jenkinson. The nucleus is more, morn. And the rest, in Mr. Jenkinson, is the tail. This means that the maximum possible number of components in a tone unit is 4. If we have a prehead, a head, a nucleus, and a tail. So there's an example that has got more present. It was better than I expected, you know. It was better than I expected, you know. It was prehead. Better than I expected. Nucleus high fall. Did you know? Tail. It was better than I expected, you know. You try it with me. It was better than I expected, you know. Again. It was better than I expected, you know. Notice the weak form of was better, characteristically used in an unstressed position. It was better than I expected. So, here we've got these 4 components, prehead, head, nucleus, tail. I've put brackets, parentheses, round each of them except the nucleus, because they're optional, they're not necessarily present. The nucleus is always there, but the other components may or may not be there. Now when I say they're optional, this doesn't exactly mean that you exercise a free choice. It's going to depend upon the structure of the utterance, on the words that you use. If at the beginning there are unstressed syllables or unaccented syllables, then you have a prehead. If there aren't any such syllables, then you don't. This means that if you begin with a word that's accented, if the stress is on the first syllable of that word, what do you want? No prehead. If it's a word that has an unstressed syllable at the beginning, well then there is going to be. Remarkably strange. Remarkably, now because remarkably has unstressed at the beginning, that means there's got to be a prehead. So it's determined by the structure of the words that are used. Likewise, at the end we've got the nucleus. If there are words or syllables following it, unaccented, then we have a tail. Again, if you end with a content word, lexical item, and it has final stress, then there's going to be no tail. This is one of my friends. This is one of my friends. Friends, monosyllable, nothing after it, no tail. But if you say, this is one of my acquaintances. Acquaintances. Now, acquaintances, you've got 2 unstressed syllables, therefore there's a tail. So it's just determined by the choice of lexical item, in that case, friends or acquaintances. And that's what I mean by saying that it's optional, but you don't really exercise any separate choice. Here are some possible utterances. And what we must do is analyse them in terms of these components we've been talking about. First is very simple, no. Now, is there a prehead there? No. Is there a head? No. Is there a nucleus?
Yes.
Is there a tail?
No.
So there's just a nucleus and nothing else. Here's another utterance. Who's up at the door? Nobody. 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 Now, what have we got here? A nucleus and a tail. Tail. Nobody. Nucleus plus tail. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Now there we've got a stressed but unaccented Jones. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We could stress the mist of Mr. Thank you, Mr. sort of optional. In rapid speech we usually don't. Thank you, Mr. Jones. What have we got there? Nucleus and tail. Longer tail. Oops, going too fast. Here's a little exchange. First person says, thank you very much. Answer, not at all. Thank you very much. Not at all. You try it. Thank you very much. Not at all. So in each case here we've got the same sort of pattern. We've got a head and a nucleus. Each time. Head plus nucleus. Because here we've got two accented syllables. Thank much. Not at all. And so this gives us an onset for the first one, therefore a head from the onset up to the nucleus, and then the nucleus for the second one, not at all. And in answer to that, you might say, oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is in answer to thank you very much. When you turn it round and you emphasize the other person, no, it's not you thanking me, it's me thanking you. Thank you very much. What's the structure of that? Thank you very much. Head, nucleus, and tail. Tail here because we have de-accented the repeated very much. So this is head, nucleus, tail. Well, we're being very effusive in our thanks, because now we say, I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough. Now here we've got, for the first time in these, a prehead. I can't, there's the onset. I can't thank you enough. Thank has a rhythmic beat. I can't thank you enough, but no pitch prominence. So we've got an onset accent on can't, a nuclear accent on enough, which gives us prehead, head, and nucleus. I can't thank you enough. And just one more illustration. Is Peter coming with us? Well, I think so. I think so. You try it. I think so. I think so. I think so. There we've got a nucleus, think, followed by a tail, preceded by a prehead. And this illustrates the general point that you can have a prehead without a head. They're independent of one another, in spite of the name, which is perhaps a bit confusing. So this is prehead, nucleus, and tail. Just let's go through those all together and think about the structure of them as we say them. First one, after me, no.
No.
Nobody.
Nobody.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I can't thank you enough.
I can't thank you enough.
I think so.
I think so.
Good. You may ask, what's the point of all this terminology? And the point is that the range of possible pitch patterns differs at each of these 4 points. Thus, we can recognize a number of preheads, a number of heads, a number of nuclear tones, and a number of tails. It's not quite true to say they're all independent of one another, but it's nevertheless useful and convenient to study them as 4 separate things. And today, therefore, we're going to look at the question of nuclear tones and tails. Although the preheads and heads come before them when we speak, they're less important from the point of view of the meaning, and so we leave them for a later lecture. What we look at now is the question of what are the possible nuclear tones and what are the tails that are associated with them. And here there is one very general important point, namely that the choice of tail depends on the choice of nuclear tone. Your important decision is to choose the nucleus tone. We saw yesterday the question of choosing the nucleus placement. Having decided where it goes, you have to decide which tone it is. Once you've got which tone it is, then the tail follows automatically. Now, in the history of English intonation studies, once the general concept of nucleus or tonic had been identified, the big question people asked is now, how many different nuclear tones do we need to recognize? And there's a problem here, there's a difficulty. One reason is that in certain ways the range is not discrete. That is to say, we're not dealing with a limited number of possibilities, but we have various gradients. For example, take falling tones. The honest truth is you can have almost any kind of fall, starting at various degrees of height and ending at various degrees of depth, and going from one to the other. Nevertheless, it's convenient for teaching purposes to simplify this and either say, right, we have a falling tone. That's one of the options. That's what Daniel Jones did. He had it as tone 1, falling tone. Or we say, no, it's very important to make a difference between high fall and low fall, where the high fall is involved, warm, shows emotion and so on, and the low fall doesn't. And that's O'Connor and Arnold, so they have high fall versus low fall. But anybody who tries to study actual material recorded in natural circumstances from native speakers knows that it's often very difficult to decide whether we're dealing with a high fall or a low fall. And to be honest, there are all sorts of intermediate degrees of this. Why? Well, because there are intermediate degrees of involvement, intermediate degrees of emotionality, intermediate degrees of warmth on the part of the speaker. So although we can easily recognize two extremes, a high fall, yes, and a low fall, yes. The real truth of the matter is that there are a large number of intermediate possibilities, yes, yes, yes. I'm now going to present to you the O'Connor and Arnold system, which recognizes 7 different nuclear tones. But bear in mind what I've said, that this is not the entire answer to the story. This is a useful working analysis. The more different things we recognize and try and teach, the more complicated our lessons get. The fewer things we recognize and teach, the simpler the lesson, but the further removed from reality it is. And there's no way of resolving this general problem. David Brazel came along about 10 years after O'Connor and Arnold was first published. So Brazel in the early 70s, O'Connor and Arnold in the early 60s. And Brazel had one very important generalization which he made and which previously people had missed. And that was the notion that falling tones in general are different in meaning from rising tones in general, because falling tones, as Brazel put it, proclaim some statement, whereas a rising tone refers to something else. This wasn't exactly new. Again, it can be found in Daniel Jones, but Brazel quite correctly emphasized it and made it into something teachable. So, following Brazel, we can say that falls have in common, falling nuclei, that they represent a definite statement. They tell you something is complete. They're proclaiming a statement. And as far as questions are concerned, we might notice that WH questions usually have a fall. Now in English, again, people try very hard to say, is there some link between syntactic function and intonation? Can we say that statements have this, orders, commands, imperatives have that, questions have something else? Can we do it that way? Well, we can't really, because the truth of the matter is that almost any sentence structure can be associated with almost any intonation pattern. Nevertheless, there are clear preferences. And among questions, it's clear that it's important in English to distinguish WH questions, questions with a question word, where are you going, what is your name, who did you talk to, how are you going to do it, WH questions, from general questions, polar questions, yes-no questions. Are you sure? Have you been here long? Didn't you do that yesterday? Wasn't that the man I was talking to? And we can say that the default, that's the expected value of the intonation pattern, is a fall with a WH question, not a rise with a yes-no question. So next time somebody tells you that questions are always said with a rising tone, it's not true. And as far as WH questions are concerned, it's not even very frequent. Now, on the back of the handout sheet, you can see diagrammatic representations of these 7 different tones. If you look at the column headed without tail, there we've got the word yes as a nucleus and as a one-word utterance, so with no tail, with no pre-head, with no head. Let's go through those now, and you look at the diagram while I say the example. So first of all, with a high fall, yes, yes, yes. You try it. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. Now a low fall, yes, yes, yes. Yes. Notice that the high fall starts high, the low fall starts not so high. They both go down to the bottom. Yes. Yes. Let's get the difference. High fall, yes. Yes. Low fall, yes. Yes. And then we have the rise fall. This is a little bit more difficult. This is yes. Yes. Starts in the middle, goes up and down. Yes. 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 Notice that the loudest part is at the beginning. If I say yes, that's a high fall. I might start a bit before the top and lead up to the top. Yes, that's a high fall. But if I start loud in the middle, yes, then go up and down, that's a rise fall. So it's to do with the dynamics of this, as well as with the actual shape. This is one of the reasons that if you just feed this into a machine that gives you a tracing of the fundamental frequency, you may be a bit puzzled by what comes out, because it doesn't necessarily correlate the loudness, the intensity, in the way that the human ear does. With the human ear, we can see immediately there's a difference between yes and yes. On the pattern of the fundamental tracing, they may be very similar. Now, tomorrow, Dr. Huckvale will be demonstrating to you equipment of precisely that kind. You will see that the tracings that you get really don't look quite like the ones I'm now putting in front of you. And the reason is that what I'm showing you now is a schematic representation which corresponds to human perception. What the machine observes is a physical reality. When we're dealing with language, unfortunately, we're concerned not only with physical reality, but with mental reality. And intonation is one of the areas where there is something of a mismatch between physical reality and mental reality. And that is why, when I get beginning master's students who come along and want to work on English intonation, and they say, give me a machine, that'll give me all the facts, and I'll then do some statistics. I have to tell them, no, life is more complicated than that. Unfortunately, you have to be sure that you're observing the linguistic items that you're interested in, and you can't get this information just from a machine. Yeah, the machine is useful, the machine helps you. It's important to know what the difference is anyhow between what the human brain thinks is happening and what the machine tells you is really happening. Right, we've done the falling tones. Now we come to the mid-level tone, middle of the back page, which is yes, 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 doesn't go up, doesn't go down, stays on the same pitch, yes, yes,
Yes. Yes.
not very common, but it is one that we sometimes use. Now we come to the rises, three kinds of rise. The high rise, which really can start anywhere but ends pretty high. Let's take this one here that starts in the middle and goes high. Yes, 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 yes. And then the low rise, which starts at the bottom, goes to the middle. Yes, 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 yes. Do them again, the high rise, yes,
Yes.
and the low rise, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And lastly, the fall rise starts in the middle, goes down, and comes up again. Yes.
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 Yes, typically doesn't come up quite as far as it started. Yes. Okay, yes. Alright, back to the front page. What do these tones mean? Well, again, as far as meaning is concerned, do I give you very general, vague statements which are easy to remember, or do I make very complicated, intricate statements which are more accurate but difficult to remember? O'Connor and Arnold give you a meaning which combines the syntactic information, statement, question, and so on, with the tone. And that means you have 7 tones times 5 different kinds of syntactic structure, which means 35 different possibilities, each of which has 3 or 4 adjectives associated with it. You can't remember it. Furthermore, within questions, we probably have to distinguish yes-no questions, WH questions, alternative questions, echo questions, repetition questions, each of which is a bit different. And there's a problem of remembering all of that. So here are some rather general, rather vague intonation meanings. First of all, then the falls. All falls, as we see, tend to mean something definite, something complete, something proclaiming. The high fall means the speaker is lively, is involved in what he's saying, is engaged, as we say, in the sense that you're engaged, you believe in something. You have a view about it. So the high fall is used to show engagement and a lively attitude, as against the low fall, which means lack of interest, coldness, boredom, low spirits. How are you feeling today? Wonderful. That's a mismatch between the word you use and the intonation, because a low fall, wonderful, means no, I'm not really feeling very good at all. If I say, how are you feeling today? Wonderful. Okay, your intonation backs up the words you're using. If I say, how are you feeling today? Reasonable. Well, again, we've got an oddity. Your intonation says fine, your words don't seem to agree with it. The rise fall is one that we keep for the more advanced classes. It has a complex set of possible meanings. One is assertive or challenging. Now, are you sure you can handle this? Yes. I'm sure I can, yes. Challenging. But it can also mean, I don't take responsibility for this. Now, who's going to look after the people this afternoon? Peter. means I don't care, it's not my responsibility, I don't want to know. It can also show humour, argumentative meanings, and so on like this. It can show smugness, it can show complacency, has a wide range of special intonation meanings. What are we having for tea today? Strawberries. That is this special meaning with a rise for strawberries. It means I'm proud, I'm pleased, we've got something special, I'm clever because I bought them, or wasn't that nice of Mommy to go and get them for us, or various other possible meanings. In general, the rise for is full of interest, but rather difficult for the learner. Those were falls. The basic thing then is to think, how involved are we? Plenty of emotion, high fall, coldness, low fall. Rises. Rises in general are what Brazel calls referring, that is to say they are in some sense incomplete, they depend on something else, either because they're non-final, there's more material to come, or because, although they are final, nevertheless, they refer to something before. Let's just look at an example of that. Supposing we got a construction involving a subordinate clause and a main clause. The usual thing in English is to have the subordinate clause first, and then the main clause. When I got home, I had my dinner. When I got home, I had my dinner. Now there the subordinate clause, the when clause, the adverbial clause of time at the beginning, that has a rise on its nucleus home because it's not final. It means there's more to come. The main clause, nucleus din, in dinner, that is final, and so that gives you the fall to say we've come to the end. And that's a very typical sequence. Rise, something to come. Fall, we've got there. Try that with me. When I got home, I had my dinner. When I got home, I had my dinner. Once again, when I got home, I had my dinner. Okay? That's a very typical basic structure. A rise and then a fall. However, English syntax allows you to put the clauses in the opposite direction. We can have the main clause first, and then we have the subordinate clause. This has a slight difference of meaning. It highlights the time. Perhaps I usually have my dinner at work, but on this occasion, because I was able to go off earlier than usual, so I had my dinner when I got home. There we've got a subordinate, apparent main clause. At least it's not final. We mark it as not final by giving it a full rise. I had my dinner, tells us there's something to come still, when I got home. Although that's the subordinate clause, nevertheless it's the end of the utterance, and so again we mark it with a full. I had my dinner when I got home. You try that? I had my dinner when I got home. I had my dinner when I got home. Rises. The high rise is the one that can convert a statement into a question. If I say, "You're sure?" I'm expecting you to confirm, "Yes, I am." You're sure? That's right? That's what you want? We make a statement form that, using the high rise, can indicate that it's to be interpreted as a question. Okay, that's the end of what we tell the beginners. Now, the more advanced students, first of all, you can do this with a for. You're sure? You've got to say yes or no. Is that what you want? Well, that's a question, of course, now, but even that's what you want. In statement form, it can still be interpreted as a question. Second thing, in some kinds of English, Australian English, American Valley Girl English from Los Angeles, and now increasingly elsewhere, people have commented on the use of high rises with statements. I'm John. In America, in a restaurant, you'll be greeted with, "Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm your waitress tonight." A rise each time, a high rise, as if she's seeking your agreement to this statement. And as I say, it's been commented on a great deal in Australian English. I don't think I can switch from an American to an Australian accent straight off. Let's try. Hi, I'm Joan. I'm Joan. This is where I live. This is our Barbie. Why don't you come in? Have a prawn. All of these things with rising tones. Again, a sort of suggestion that we're putting forward these statements hesitantly. We want you to agree. So it's a kind of way of being polite. Instead of asserting this, that, the next, which you've got to take, we say this, that, the next, and you have to agree and accept each of these statements one after another. So the whole question of falls versus rises is very interesting, and it seems to be changing at present in English. Furthermore, there are notable local accents of English that seem to use rises where other people use falls. This has been commented on for Northern Ireland, for example, for Belfast's speech, but also in Birmingham, in Liverpool, in Newcastle, various other urban areas. On the handout, for high rise, we say questioning, but also including echo questions and repetition questions. I bring a dog in. This is Jimmy. He's my poodle. Your poodle? That's an echo question. Your poodle? You echo my words back to me. Today we're going to study neurophysiology. Neurophysiology? You query it. You say it back to me. Very similar to that is a repetition question. Today we're going to study neurophysiology. Neuro what? Because you didn't quite catch what I said. So if you echo my words back to me, that's an echo question. If you want me to repeat my words, that's a repetition question. Now I've got three panniers here. Three whats? You didn't catch my word. And so you ask me to repeat it. You do this with a high rise. Both echo questions and repetition questions we do with a high rise. Mercedes will be taking you to the theatre. Who will be taking us to the theatre? High rise at the beginning. Mercedes will be taking you to the theatre. Mercedes will be taking us where? Repetition question. You know how to do this with who and where. How would you do it if you wanted to query the word taking? Mercedes will be taking us to the theatre. Mercedes will be
Taking us where?
Well, if you want to query it with a WH word, you've got to do Mercedes will be doing what with us? Or in colloquial English, we even sometimes make a verb out of what. Mercedes will be whatting us to the theatre. We don't write that down. We don't tell you about that until sometimes soon. Because we haven't got a WH word for verbs in English. It's a bit embarrassing sometimes. We've got who, what for nouns, and what kind of and so on for adjectives, where, when, how for adverbs, but we don't really have one for verbs. So we have to say doing what. Right, low rise is the default for yes-no questions. Yes-no questions. Are you happy? Did you do it? Have you been here long? Nucleus, long, low rise. The low rise is also used to be soothing, reassuring, and encouraging with a statement. Don't worry. Worry. Nothing to be alarmed about. There's nothing to be alarmed about. Alarmed about low rise. It's also used in all sorts of routine exchanges. Here's your money, thank you. Thank you. It's the ordinary, polite way of saying thank you. It encourages the person to speak further. Can I help you? I'd like some orange. Here you are. Here you are. Just oiling the wheels of social interaction. The full rise, it's unsure. It's tentative. We're a bit hesitant about saying something. We don't say it too firmly. You're going to be here tomorrow? Yes. Well, it means I am going to be here tomorrow, but I'm busy and I don't want to see you tomorrow. Or something like that. Or it might mean I'm not sure. It's a way of politely correcting people or politely contradicting them. Here are some blue glasses. Red? Now, if you said red, it would mean don't be silly. You can see they're red, they're not blue. If you want to be polite, they're blue. I think you find they're blue. They're blue, actually. Full rise, polite correction. Here's a cup. A glass. A glass. Try that with a full rise. A glass. 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 Okay, you get plenty more practice on that, I hope, in your practical groups. The mid-level is fairly rare. It's another non-final term. You hear the announcer on the radio saying, that's the end of the weather forecast. Now we move on to the news. Weather forecast level, da 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 da. We're waiting to see what's coming next. Here's the news. Now we must look at the behaviour of tails. 4 on the handout. After falls, tails are low level. We fall on the nucleus, everything else is low level. Let's look at those, turn over the page. Look at the effect of a tail on a high fall. We had a high fall, yes. But if we chose the word 50, we get 50. 50. There we got it. And the tail T is low. 50. Do it after me, 50. 50. With a prehead, preposterous. 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 With a long tail, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Okay, low fall, much the same. Low level tail, yes. 50. 50. 50. Preposterous. Preposterous. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Okay, rise fall. Now here you have to be careful. Here, if there's a tail of only one syllable, the rise and the fall happen there. So we get yes, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. If there are 2 or more syllables in the tail, then the syllable immediately after the nucleus is high, and all the rest are low. Preposterous, 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 preposterous. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Notice do is high. Why do you want to do it? Everything else low. Why do you want to do it? Sometimes people mishear that and think the nucleus is on do. Why do you? But it isn't. It's why do you? We get a weak form. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it?
Why?
Okay, Mid-level is easy. Everything just stays mid-level. Let's do those. Yes?
Yes.
50.
50.
Preposterous.
Preposterous.
Why do you want to do it?
Why do you want to do it?
Keep level, don't go up, don't go down. Why do you want to do it?
Yes.
And that leaves us then with the rises. Now, in the case of the rise, the point is that the actual shape of the rise, the low rise, or the high rise, or the fore rise, is spread out over the whole complex of nucleus plus tail. If there's a tail, it doesn't take place on the tail, it's spread out. Sorry, if there's a tail, it doesn't take place on the nucleus, it's spread out over the nucleus plus tail. As you can see in the diagrams, that was a high level, mid-level tone. In the diagrams, the mid-level, the one that we're talking about, doesn't go up, doesn't go down. Caught myself doing it. You can see it in the diagrams. What's coming? Here's what's coming. High rise, first of all. Yes?
Yes.
50?
50.
Preposterous?
Preposterous.
Why do you want to do it?
Why do you want to do it?
Nucleus is why. Why do you want to do it? Yes.
Why do you want to do it?
I might say, I want to do it because of the phase of the moon. What? Why do you want to do it?
Why do you want to do it?
Yes. Putting the nucleus on why because it seems very improbable. Want therefore a repetition of the reason, a repetition question. Low rise, yes.
Yes.
50.
50.
Preposterous.
Preposterous.
Why do you want to do it?
Why do you want to do it?
Again, nucleus is why, in spite of what you might think. Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? And the trickiest one, then, the fore rise. On one syllable, yes.
Yes.
On two, 50.
50.
50. With two or more syllables in the tail, you drop down on the first one and you rise on the last one. Preposterous. Preposterous. Preposterous.
Preposterous.
Why do you want to do it?
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 Good. Well, we've been through all the possible combinations. I must leave it now to your practical class teachers to drill you in all of them. Good luck.